Look, if we actually look at the history, the hatred didn't seem so baseless. Everyone's talking today about baseless hatred, for good reason. The walls of Jerusalem were breached on the 17th of Tammuz, and which eventually led to the ransacking, desecration, destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. But the hatred didn't seem so baseless. The sages teach us it was due to baseless hatred, but if we look at the history, there were serious foreign policy disagreements. How did we deal with Rome? There were serious religious disagreements. How do we deal with the oral Torah? Between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the aristocratic elite. They only followed the written law. How do we deal with that? There was a lot of corruption. The priesthood was going to the highest bidder. There were a lot of high priests that were dying. They weren't going into the Holy of Holies with proper intentions. They were desecrating the Holy of Holies. I could understand why people would hate those people if they wanted to sell us out to Rome in order for them to just maintain power. Then you had the Zealot faction who viewed everyone else as like moderates, and they wanted sovereignty at any cost. And these people were religious too. So there were serious disagreements about what was going to happen. And then once the siege started, it even got worse because the Zealot faction didn't want to make peace with Rome, and they didn't even want to negotiate. So they killed the moderates. And then once they took care of the moderate factions, they then started fighting within themselves. This one wasn't extreme enough. That one was that. They wanted power over this section. They wanted power over the whole thing. And before you knew it, Jews were burning the food supplies of other Jews. Hundreds of thousands of Jews died, not just by the hands of Rome, but because Jews burned the food supplies. So Jews were starved to death. So you could understand why certain people would hate other people. That's actually the point that I think the sages are trying to teach. The sages are trying to say that it's actually not that different from what we're going through today. How do we deal with Iran? How do we deal with Turkey? How do we deal with Hamas? How do we deal with Hezbollah? How do we deal with the United States? How do we deal with the internal politics? Who has power? You know, you have the Ben-Gvirs, you have the Yair Golans, and you have the Bennetts, and you have the rabbis, and you have the anti-Zionists, and you have the religious Zionists, and look, there's a lot of different factions today, and a lot of people have good intentions, and, you know, the hatred also doesn't seem so baseless today. If you think someone's really destroying the country because of what they want to do, you can understand why someone would hate someone. But the sages are actually teaching us something very powerful. It's not that there were disagreements. It's actually that disagreements have nothing to do with baseless hatred. We're not even talking about the same thing. It's not about disagreeing with each other. That wasn't what destroyed the Second Temple, the disagreements. What destroyed the Second Temple actually lies in another question, which is,